Hello, and welcome to the CMP Financial Reporting Requirements webinar. My name is Sharon Moore, and I'm the team lead for the Grants and Contracts Administration section of the Coastal Resources Division of the GLO. Today, we're going to be going over the payment request checklist that was sent to you by Julie McIntyre. If you did not receive one, you can always email me, and I will get that to you as soon as I can. So if you have it open today, that's going to help you as we go through this. The first tab is just a little introduction letter from me. It gives you some information about the workbook and some things to remember when submitting your reimbursement request. There's also a link here that is the place for you to go to get all the forms that you need for administering the grant. I've also included all of those forms and their instructions here in this workbook so that you have it all in one place and you don't have to always go out to the website to find them. We try not to update the forms during the middle of a cycle or whatever, so we try to keep them, as the same as they were when you first entered into your contract at the beginning of this cycle. So, but it is a good idea to just double check at this link every now and then to just make sure you do have a current form that you're using. The tab named Payment Request Checklist is going to have a checklist on it that you need to now fill out and turn in with each submission. It gives you just a little roadmap to follow as you're putting your payment packet together. In line 1 here, you're going to put in your GLO contract number, which is, of course, what was on the contract that was executed between your entity and the GLO. This is not your entity's project number that you may assign to it. This has to be the GLO contract number. On line 2 here, you're going to want to put the invoice number that you're submitting with this billing period, and that's either your auto-generated number, or if you just number yours 1, 2, 3, whatever, you'll just put that in here. Also, be sure you're changing this to the current service dates for the billing period that you are sending in. And then on number 4, what you need to put here is the total project expenditures for the billing period that you're reporting. So that'll include what you want to be reimbursed for and your local and third-party match amounts that you're going to be reporting on this billing. So be sure it's the total amount here. On line 5, you're going to then tell us how much of that is your local share and your third-party share. Just put that amount here as a total. And then number 6 will calculate for you. And this calculation should come out to be the amount you're requesting for reimbursement that will also be on your invoice for expenditures that you're going to be turning in. For section 2, this is just a place for you to check off that, you have included in this packet an invoice for CMP federal expenditures, whether you are requesting reimbursement or you have $0 for this billing period. You must always turn in an invoice, whether it's a $0 or you are actually requesting reimbursement. If you don't turn one in, then it's going to show up in our system that we don't have one from you for that billing period when it was due, and you're going to get a note that says you're late on your invoice, and we don't want to have to send that out to you. So just be sure that we have that by the 10th of every month, along with your local match and your third-party match. Also, if it's a 0 for that month or that billing period, it has to be turned in as well. And so you'll just check off here. I've got this in my packet. I'm including this in my packet. And then this number 3 is very important, number 3 and 4. You must include a copy of that billing period's progress report, and you must include the deliverables that are due for that billing period. If your deliverables are not ready to go and you need an extension, With this submission, you will have to ask for an amendment to your deliverable due dates and explain why your deliverable is not complete. And that will need to be included in this packet. If there are no deliverables due for this period, then you'll check number 5 that says deliverables are not due this billing period. But as you'll notice here, for these 2 asterisks, payment will be held if your progress report and deliverables are not submitted. So if they're late and not submitted with this packet, your request for payment will be held until those items are received. This just gives you a little background here, and you can find this information in your Article 4 of your contract. It's that each federal expense or match expense must be supported with actual itemized receipts, invoices, and any other documentation that we may feel like we need to substantiate the cost that you have turned in. You must also show proof of payment for these expenses. So whatever your way of showing payment is, I know agencies like state agencies and universities, you don't have bank statements and canceled checks and so forth. So just a screen print of your voucher data form out of your accounting system that will show the payee, the date paid, and the amount paid, that'll do. Credit card receipts that are attached to your itemized receipts and your invoices will be sufficient for payment as well, proof of payment as well. In Section 3, when you fill out your invoice, if any one budget category has exceeded the approved budget amount that's authorized by the contract, you will need to turn in a budget amendment with this packet. If you have not gone over, and you'll need to check yes here, if you have not gone over any and a budget amendment is not required, then you will check no, that you have checked, you have made sure that none of your categories are over budget, and so that you don't feel you need to turn in a budget amendment. In Section 4, this goes with subcontracts and agreements that you may issue to subcontractors or for this same project. When you negotiate a contract and get it executed with your subcontractors, you must turn that in to the GLO within 10 days of you executing that contract. So this is asking you, have all approved subcontracts been submitted? If not, you must attach a copy. So, and if you're not going to attach a copy, you've got to say yes, either yes, they've been sent in already, yes, they're attached, or if you put here no, that you might want to put a note that not executed at this time or something like that. If you have no subcontracts, then you'll click here for NA because you have no subcontracts with this. But just to say that if you have subcontract agreements and you have not turned them in to GLO, then we will not pay expenses on any invoice that you turn in that are to that subcontractor. That will be, you will be required to deduct that from your invoice. And down here in Section 5, please fill in the name, title, and pertinent information here for the person who is putting together this packet and can answer questions for the finances on this. Down here, just letting you know to be sure that they are your executed packet is in PDF format, and it's submitted to the CMP receipts email address that's in your contract. If you have questions regarding financial reports or budgets, you can call either Maria Sines at this number or myself, and that's my number here. For all other questions regarding, say, progress reports and deliverables to do with your project, you'll need to contact your GLO project manager. It's very important to use this checklist so that you don't skip over something that's needed so that your payment is not held up. So be sure you review this, be sure it's filled out completely, and that you have included everything that it's requesting on the checklist. The next tab is how to assemble a packet so that it's easily reviewed by our office, and we don't have to hunt for things and call you and so forth, and have it well organized. So on your for the payment request, we like to have it in the following order, which is the payment request checklist, and then your CMP federal expenditures invoice. And then if you have an entity auto-generated invoice, you can put that right after the CMP federal invoice that we provide you. And then all your supporting documentation behind that. And then you'll start over again, but in the same packet, with your invoice for local match and third-party expenditures, and they should be laid out with your documentation behind it, just as you did with the federal expenditures request. But that will be all in one PDF. That will be your payment request packet. Then on your same email to us, in two separate PDF forms, you will need to put your progress report and deliverables that are due, or your request to extend your deliverable due dates. So you'll have 3 PDF attachments to one email. And the email is as we said here, the CMP receipts. Be sure, this is important here, to reference your GLO contract number and the payment request number in the subject line of your email. The next tab is the things that might and will delay your reimbursement request. So these are things that you need to be sure you address in every packet, or it can be, your invoice can be put on hold or delay the payment. So the very first 2 things are the very important, is that you don't have late progress reports and you don't have late deliverables, because as we said before, those will be, we will hold the payment until those have been received. If you use old forms and you're not using the most current ones that we have provided you here or that are on our website, we will return it to you to redo it, because we have a certain coding block at the bottom that needs to be on there. And if you've got a very old form that doesn't have that correct coding block, then we have to return that to you. If you turn in your invoice or your match or your budget amendment without an authorizing signature, that's going to delay your request. If you, on your forms, if you use a duplicate expenditure period from a previous period, and this happens when you save last month's invoice as this month's invoice and forget to fill out the top and edit the top. So be sure that if you're saving last month's and rolling it forward to this month, that you're completely revising it for this current month. New dates, new invoice number, new billing period, whatever, those things that need to change. If it's a yes for a final invoice or a no, it's not a final invoice, be sure all those things are updated and it's not just saved over from the prior month. Another thing that will delay your invoice is having your previous invoice on hold. So what's best to do is, if you have been notified by Maria that you need to provide additional information or revise your invoice in any way, and that she's got it on hold, that you do not submit the next invoice until this current one is totally resolved, because it's going to then, it could change your numbers and so forth. And if you've already turned in the next invoice, then we'll have to turn that back to you to correct the numbers on your previously invoiced column. So just be sure that you get anything that's on hold resolved completely before you turn in any new invoices. The next thing is submitting invoices with negative balances in any one budget category. We went over that on the checklist. If you have negative balances in a budget category and you have not turned in a budget amendment requesting a rebudget to correct that, then we're going to probably send that back to you and ask you to fix it, or to take the expenditures off if that's what's needed, or to give us a budget amendment. But it'll be put on hold and it'll delay your payment. The next thing is missing and or unorganized backup documentation. So as I showed you on how to assemble, if you have it assembled correctly in an organized manner where it can be followed by budget category, that's going to help it get through the system faster. And of course, if you have no backup for particular expenses, well, we will have to put it on hold until you provide that backup. Turning in illegible receipts. This happens quite a bit. We get those and we can't read them. And so we're going to turn that back to you and ask you to please turn in receipts that can be read. Not highlighting or circling the expenditure amounts on your receipts or invoices that are being charged on this invoice can delay it. You know, we have to hunt through all the documentation to try to figure out what parts you're charging of a particular invoice or receipt. It's just better to highlight for everything, just for your payroll, your friends, your travel. Circle it, highlight it, something so that we can pick it out and know what you put on your invoice. And like I said, if there's a partial, this next one, if there's a partial invoice being charged, please highlight the expenses on that receipt or on the invoice and say, this invoice, only these items are being charged to this grant. Be sure that's indicated and it's very clear and spelled out. And then including unnecessary additional paperwork that we have to go through that has no purpose for the backup. Just if it doesn't have an expenditure on it or it doesn't have something to do with an explanation for an expenditure, and if it does, highlight why you're turning that additional paperwork in. If there's just something on there you want to draw our attention to, then highlight that. But otherwise, just leave out additional unnecessary paperwork because that slows down the process. And then again at the bottom, just letting you know to email your invoice packet, your progress report, and deliverables as separate PDF attachments and only send it to the CMP Receipts email address. Please do not copy all the other GLO staff as, say, your project manager or our director, just only to the CMP Receipts, because we've set this up so that everything funnels through that. Maria checks that email, she logs everything in, and then she notes who she sent that out to so that we have one location that we know it came into and we know where it's at by looking at her notes. And if we have it coming to everybody in the division, then it becomes a problem. So this is really important to go over and make sure you are following those tips and guidelines there. All right, the next page on your workbook is your instructions for your invoice and match. I'm not going to read these to you. They're here for you to take a look at. I'm just going to go straight to the invoice, and I'm just going to go over it with you. So here we have an example of an invoice that I've just filled out some information at the top for you. Just be sure you put an invoice date, an invoice number, these federal ID numbers and DUNS numbers that are requested. Be sure that you have included and changed this to the current expenditure period that you are reporting, and indicate, and we have it here where it either says yes/no. You can either type in that, or and I'm not sure if you can. You may have to print this out and circle it. It may be a protected field. But anyway, however you can do it, either please indicate whether this is your final invoice or no, it's not your final invoice. Put your contract number, GLO contract number here, and please put your project title here, not the cycle title. We get a lot where it just says CMP Cycle 22. That does not tell us what project we're looking at. Some of our people go just strictly by project title, and some of us use the contract number. So be sure you include both here so that everybody can pick up on which project this is. Of course, put in who you are, your entity, the phone number, email of the person signing this. That's why on the checklist, if it's a different person that has put the whole packet together than who's going to be signing this, please put that on the checklist so that we can call somebody or email somebody that can answer questions about the actual financial documentation that was turned in. This is just a little note to remind everybody you must attach itemized receipts and proof of payment for all expenditures. That's been on here for years. So on the invoice, you'll put in here your current approved budget. And in this column, expenditures, this invoice, that's going to be for this billing period, what you are turning in for this billing period. You will not ever make any kind of adjustments in this column over here that says previously invoiced, because that's not going to get recorded by us, and then our books are not going to be in sync with yours. So say, for instance, on last month's bill, you charged, say, $50 too much to supplies, and it really belonged to another grant. It just got coded incorrectly, and in your reconciliation, you caught it. You will not go over here and reduce this by $50 in the amount previously invoiced, because it's been previously invoiced, it's already been paid and approved and all that. And if you've got it in this column, we don't record from this column. We only record from the current expenditures, this invoice. So you would reduce your current month's expenditures. You're going to have backup back there for $500, but you're only going to have $450 here. So what you'll have to do is put a copy of the receipt that you erroneously charged on your last bill, and put a note on it with the brackets around it saying this is being subtracted during this period. It was charged to the wrong grant. Or say you want to move it to, you decided to recategorize it in your accounting system, and it's not a supply, it should have gone to other. Well, you'll just reduce supplies by 50, increase other by 50, increase it, decrease it. And then you still have to have that documentation back there showing the reduction in supplies and the increase in other, so that it all adds up when we go through it. So and then of course this amount remaining column is going to calculate for you. So you'll just roll over into this, what you've previously invoiced, exactly how you invoiced it, and you will only put here what you're invoicing us for or correcting during this billing period. All right, I'm going to show you an invoice that we put together as just an example of a good invoice, how it's been organized, and the type of backup documentation that it includes. I will send this to you as well if you would like a copy of it. So we just put in some numbers here. And of course, in this example, your expenditure period that I have here is not going to match the periods that are on the backup documentation, because I have just gone into just all kinds of different invoices and pulled documentation that was a good example of good documentation. So it's going to have odd billing periods and service periods on it, so it's not going to match this, but you'll get the idea. So, and then I just printed it out and circled, no, this isn't the final invoice. Be sure it's signed and dated. And then you'll see here, excuse me, got the current budget, got the current expenditures, and we've got the amount previously invoiced and what's remaining in our budget for this contract. So if we go on down, here's a good example of how to put your backup together. By having, a lot of people do this, they have these divider sheets for salary and fringe, and they will list on here what numbers they have used off of this attached backup. They will also circle and put a box around the amounts that they are using for this billing period. This is, this is like a payroll sheet from a entity's accounting system or payroll system. That works. It has the FICA. It has all the information spelled out. Tells us what's being charged here. So that's a good example. And it has the dates. It's going to be over here. It's got the period ending and the for this payroll, and it has the dates of the payroll on here somewhere. I saw it, but it needs to have the date that the payroll is being charged for, and for whatever reason, I guess I can't read sideways. I can't see it right this minute. But down here on the next one, you'll see this says it's September 2017 payroll for cycle 21, and we've marked out everybody's name so that we don't put any personal information up here, but it's got the amount of hours for that day that was charged to this grant, goes on down, shows a total for the month for that employee, and then the hourly rate and the total wages being charged, then the total wages times the fringe rate and the fringe being charged. So this is a good one. This is probably like a QuickBooks type program that's being used. Here's one that I'm pretty sure is from like a university. And you'll see here, you can see, here's the dates of service. This payroll was for December of 2016. So that's clearly here, and the payroll was paid on January 3rd, 2017. So this period of when it was for the 12/1/16 through 12/31/16 is what we're going to be looking at to make sure you're charging it on the correct invoice in the correct billing period. And then, as they've done here, they've circled the amounts being charged so that we can see that not this whole sheet isn't being charged. Only one item on here is being charged for this billing period. And that helps us be able to just hone right in on that and not have to wonder which of these amounts you put on your invoice. Okay, the next thing is travel, and done the same way, giving us a little summary of what you're charging. And then this is a good example of, this is our Galveston Bay Foundation. They do oyster shell recycling, and they keep a mileage log because they have to go pick up the oysters. So this is a good thing that they've done, is give us their normal route of places they go to pick up oyster shells. So they turn this in so that we have this with each submission. We can see the places they've gone and the addresses of those places. Then below there, they'll have maps that map out those locations, and then they have their actual route and mileage, and give us the date when they went to Tommy's Seafood and Tookie's and Swamp Shack, and it gives us all that, what they did on that one day, their route that they went, 20 miles. We can look on map 1 that they have numbered, and then and they tell us what they did that day, pick up and drop off. So that's all the way down, gives you a total mileage for that month. And then, of course, here are the maps. They're numbered map 1, 2, and 3. And that makes it very easy to follow. And then here's a different entity's way of keeping up with their mileage, and this works too. It's something that's produced out of a system of theirs, and it's just got, that the business purpose was the Wetland Volunteer Event at the nursery. They left from this location and went to this location, and it was 54 miles, and they're charging $31.05, and it's on this date. So we have all the information we need to go and figure out what our mileage rate they're charging to make sure they're within the state approved rate. So this works as well. And then they give us a total here of what they're charging for that one. The next we have supplies with a list of supplies and the amount of total supplies, which will match what's on the front. And then they have the separate receipts for us. And what they've done here is always very smart idea, because we can't always read, and if we can read this, we can't really decipher exactly some of the coding that these stores put in here. So if you will mark or box or highlight the amount being charged, and then just let us know what these items are and from what type of project you have, we know whether this is reasonable supplies for the type of project you have. If you have a research project that you're research projects, you can go out and take samples and so forth, but if you're doing something that you would not need pails and sponges and plastic cups for, we'll know that by your scope of work. So just kind of notate what this is for. Same thing here. What they're showing us here is that not everything on this receipt was charged to the grant. So they're saying this receipt shows 4 supply charges, and they've listed them out here, and they tell us up here it was a dolly, a drill bit, a trash can, and some lumber. And so we can look at here and see, they didn't charge us for just $9.88. And so they're being very clear about what's going on to the grant. And then we have this a lot. This is supplies for labs. And what happens is they get something bought for a lab, and it's not just used for one grant. It's used for several grants. So what they're showing us here is that for this grant, out of this invoice, they're only charging this grant $48.48. And that, we see this a lot, and it's because that lab is used for other grants or other projects. So you need to do that when you have this kind of situation. All right, and then here is I'm thinking this is probably QuickBooks type of program that shows how they paid those invoices that we saw up top, or maybe it's below, I'm not sure which way. Anyway, it's showing that on the American Express to Home Depot, they paid $28.86. And it's telling us that this is how they paid it, this is who they paid, and the amount they paid. And I believe those tickets, yes, they're down here. So below that, then, you're going to want to have your receipts to show us, and we'll know that those, and we can see it was paid by the American Express. So that's your proof of payment right there. Go on through there. And then what they've also done is they put a copy of the American Express bill here. And I'm sure, yes, when you go down to here, you'll be able to see there are those costs that they turned in receipts for. And so we have our proof of payment for that. Okay, the next thing, if you have contractual, if you have a subcontract, you'll want to put in here, this is another, like a payment sheet out of their, probably QuickBooks, looks like, and tells us who they paid, the date they paid it, a memo about it, and the amount they paid. And then below it, we're going to see a copy of the check that they sent, or the check stub. And then here is also going to be a request for the money from the Clear Lake Water Authority. So it's kind of giving you a request, and then below that, you're going to see the actual invoice from the contractor explaining what they've done. And as you'll see here, it says that this pay application is in the amount of $129,784.50. But down here, they've told us that only thing allowable for this grant was $83,700. And then we can go down and we can see what was charged on that pay request from that subcontractor, and that we know that only the $83,700 was charged to the grant. Next is your other category and what's being charged there. And then you can go through here, and there's going to be volunteer timesheets. You'll always, if you have volunteers working on projects, you will want to always turn in a volunteer timesheet in the other category that has it completely filled out with dates, names, events, number of hours worked, and all of that. So that needs to be in there if you're using volunteers. Then here's just another example. It's just they had to take let's see here, they had to take something to get something replaced. And so this is just a little a invoice ticket, and just shows us what it is, and then it shows the proof of payment attached to that ticket for how they paid for it. And then tuition. Tuition can also go in other. So here's a copy from Texas A&M Corpus saying we're charging this tuition to this grant, and that is sufficient for that. So that's all that we have on this invoice. It's a good example of some good types of backup that you can use that we accept. And so if you all want a copy of this, I will be glad to send that to you by email if you ask me for it. So go back to the workbook, and I'm just going to skip over here to the local match. It's not much different at all from your federal expenditures invoice. It's still filled out the same way in the top and needs to be signed. You still have to put in your budget and the current expenditures and what you previously invoiced. And if you make any changes, it's going to be in this one, same as your federal expenditure invoice. Nothing different there, and nothing different at all on third. Oops, I just went too far. On third party, it's exactly the same. If you have third party match, you need to fill out the same information up here and have the same backup documentation that's required for the other forms. Okay, this is your instructions on how to just do an informal budget amendment. If you've gone over one category, more than one or more than one category in your invoice, this is the instructions for how to turn in a budget amendment. Here's the budget amendment. You're going to fill out the entire top half of this with all the information about your department and the project and everything. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to include the current budget for all of whether you're amending your local or third party or not, you will be sure you put in your current approved budget in all three of these first three categories here. Then any requested budget changes you're looking for, you're going to put in these categories. Now, as you notice, I didn't amend. We're not amending third party, but we still have to put the budget here because it's going to then give us our complete amended budget over in the last three columns. So when you do budget amendments, this should always be zero. You cannot increase or decrease your budget using this form. So if you need $50 in fringe and $500 in supplies, you have to find one of the other categories to take that $550 out of so that you net zero here. Same over here, and it would be the same here. So after you've filled out these first 6 columns right here, then this is going to calculate for you and give you your new amended budget. And that's what we are going to enter now into the database. And you're going to be needing to use on your future invoices. Be sure down here where it says justify your request below, you put an explanation in here as to why you're making these changes, what caused you to go over budget, why you can take it away from another budget and it's not going to affect that budget being completed. So give us some sort of a explanation down here. Be sure that it is signed by your authorizing official and dated. You'll receive this back usually from Maria, and she will either approve it by signing it here and dating it, or she will not approve it by signing and dating here, and then she will give you a reason why it was not approved, and you'll have to correct whatever she indicates and turn it back in. But once you have turned that in and we have updated your budget, then this is the budget over here that you will use on all future invoices until you make another budget amendment change. Okay, at the end of your project, it is required by your contract that you turn in a final project budget. So at the end of the project, when you're preparing your final invoice, I would get that done first. I would get all the match and your expenditures, all of those 3 forms prepared first. Then I would go to the CMP final budget and, of course, fill all this information in at the top as normal. Start with the most current budget you're working under. Be sure it is in these columns right here. Then this next column, actual project expenses. So at the end of the project, when you prepare your final invoice, you need to look at how everything fell out at the end. If you had to do some switching around in that last one, you know, in the current column because you are reconciling the end of the project and you see this should have gone here and that should have gone there, or, you know, you need to make sure you've got that all done so that when you get here, you record this exactly as it is on your final invoice. So put in the final invoice numbers, your final CMP request numbers, requirements here, and then your local here and your third party here as it actually is being reported on the final invoice. What's going to happen then over here under final project budget, it's just going to copy. It's just going to go over here and it's just going to copy and it's going to say, now, this is your final budget. This is going to be for our records. This is your final budget of your project as you have turned it in right now. But when you get here, you need to pay attention down here to this section that we've added for you. It's going to tell you, I've done this on purpose so you can see you had a budget of $100,000 to be reimbursed by CMP, but you only requested $97,950. And you had a budget of local match of $60,000, but on this final budget, you've only on the final invoice, as of that, you have only turned in $57,800. And the same for your third party. You've only turned in $6,400. So what this is telling you down here, under percent of obligation met, is that CMP grant met 97.95% of its obligation, but you and your third party have only met 96.33 and 96% of your obligation. So this is telling you below here that you still need to report another $970 in local match and another $130.33 in third party for these two numbers to come up to 97.95%. So these numbers under here of percent of obligation met need to be equal. And if CMP paid you more than you put in for your match, then you're going to owe more. And you need to get that rectified before and redo your invoice and redo this form before you turn it in to us. This over here is for our purposes mainly. Excuse me. We can see how much you're turning back in, which then follows down to here, and that tells me how much to deobligate from our system. So your most important spot for you to be looking at is this section right here to make sure before you turn anything in for your final invoice and final project budget that you've got this reconciled and you have met the same amount of match that we sent you. And if you've overmatched and you still have a spot here, some money here, you can move some of that match over and get some more money back. So, you know, this is to help you look to see if there's any way you can either get some more money back or show that you've got to pay more money. And then over here at the bottom, you're going to have your authorizing official, the date. Please type in here or print the authorizing official's name so that it's very legible. And then this, of course, will come back to you signed by Maria, either approved or not approved, and the reason it wasn't approved. You'll get that back for your records, and this will be a part of your final legal record here at the agency. Okay, the next is the instruction for all timesheets that we provide for you that are things that we do require, that you keep up with your time, your volunteers' time, your equipment time. So these are all attached to your contract. So on the volunteer spreadsheet, this is the information we need to know. That I'm going to put this where I can see it a little better. It's a little, there we go. So you can see all these sections that you will need to provide: the name of the volunteer, who they're with, if they're with a school, if they're with a volunteer group of some sort, you need to put the name of that group, what their tasks were they were performing that day, how many hours they worked, and the hourly rate. This is the event date and the event name up here, and it'll calculate for you here when you put in your hours worked and your hourly rate. Is going to calculate for you here. So something along this line has to be turned in for all volunteers. Employees, everybody has a different way of tracking their employees' time, but we do need the employees' time. And I showed you some examples in that perfect invoice of ways of turning it in. If this is easy for you to do, you can provide this to your staff and let them, just fill in here the hours that they worked per day on the project. Just be sure they have the project name, the employee's name, and the month and the year that they're turning this in for. If you plug it in here, if they plug it in here, it's going to add up for them down here. Then they plug in their hourly rate, it's going to calculate for them. Same thing here. It's going to take what's in this column here in J26, and it's going to put it over here so that you can put your fringe rate in, and it'll calculate that for you. So if you want to use that, this is great. If you have your own system, we accept those. Be sure it's always signed on this, because this is more of a manual operation here rather than the things that come out of your accounting systems and payroll systems. So be sure that it's got signatures here and dates if they're using these. Okay, on the equipment timesheet, it looks kind of like the employee timesheet. So you're going to put the information here, the project name, the employee name, the month and year, and what piece of equipment is being used, how many hours in each day it was used, and then it's going to calculate down here for you. You put in the hourly rate for that equipment. And so like if you have a boat and you use it 3 times a month, you put that boat on this one. If you have trucks, you'll do a separate one for trucks, and so on and so forth. Put the name of the printed name of the project manager and the project manager's signature and date for that. The last tab in this worksheet is not required. It's not a required form that is in your contract. It's just a travel log, an example of a travel log that I put together just to help you if you don't have a better way to do it. This is just something you can use. Just be sure you put the traveler's name in here, and then start out with the date of the travel, the beginning address, the address description, like it was their headquarters, where they're going, the project site name and address, or project site name, the project address over here, your starting odometer, your ending odometer, and the amount of miles, and then your mileage rate in here, and it's going to calculate for you. And then give us the purpose of that trip, sampling or an event you were having on for an outreach event or something like that. So this is just here for your convenience to use if you don't have something that your entity already has that they're using. So that is all I have in the workbook. One thing that I'm going to put, that I can put up, I was going to show you this. In your contract, Article 4, that is where you're going to find all the information about submitting your deliverables, your progress reports, your payment requests. It's got all the information in Article 4 of the contract, and gives kind of another little brief explanation, kind of like what I put on the checklist. Some things that you need to always remember when asking for reimbursement and when turning in your deliverables and progress report. This tells you where you can get your grant forms, and here's your reimbursement request information. So if nothing else, just pull out a copy of the contract, go to Article 4, and you'll have everything in here about budgets and so forth. Just one note I think I should say is that we have like a retainage. We hold the last 5% of the last part of the project amount until all deliverables, final project deliverables are in. We will hold 5% at the end to give you time to get all the final deliverables and so forth in. So keep that in mind. This just gives you a little overview of when you're doing purchases, how to be in audit compliance, all that sort of information. So that's a good spot to go to, is Article 4 of the contract. One other little thing is I put this together, and it's just helpful emails and links that you might want, and I don't think we sent this out, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want this, please email me and I will send this to you. I don't know that I can put this up on the website. I don't think they will allow me to do that. So if you want this, please let me know. It just gives a few good emails and links to different things that you might need when administering this project, this grant. All right. So some things that I want to make sure, the last thing that I don't want to forget is that when at the end of let me go over to, if at any time during the contract, during the grant, at any time you have a change in your agency's authorizing official, please send the following information to me. I will need the new person or the interim person's name, their title, the department they're in, their address, their phone number, and their email address. Because when we have to do formal budget amendments or contract amendments, we have to send those via DocuSign. Our legal department does that via DocuSign to your authorizing official for signature. And it's been a big problem where when there's a lot of changes out there and we don't get notified, then it gets sent to some email address that no longer exists or that's not being monitored. And then that contract, that amendment sits there with nobody finding it and knowing that it needs to be executed. So be sure that as soon as you know that you have a change in your agency's authorizing official, you send this information to me as soon as possible so that any future amendments that we have to have will go through smoothly. I think that that's all that I have for today. If y'all have questions or need any information, just don't hesitate to email me or give me a call. You can find my information on the website as well, all my contact information. And I hope this helps. And anytime that you need help, don't hesitate to call. Thank you, and y'all have a great day. Thanks.